Hi everyone, it's Barbara Hayward here from the Old Girl Spiritual Stuff YouTube channel and Facebook page, and now the Old Girl Spiritual Stuff .com Facebook website. Thank you very much for joining us today. And before I start, there's a little bit of housekeeping, of course. Please subscribe, please like, and maybe leave a comment. It's all to do with the analytics in the background, and it's important that we all get seen and we get these wonderful, wonderful spiritual messages out there through the most incredible spiritual people who are working in this field for goodness and for the globe to bring healing and health and well-being to all of you. So if you could just do that, that would be amazing. Today is no exception. I have a most incredible lady who's joining us today. Her name is Susan Chance, and Susan is from California, just out of one of the counties from San Diego, which is a lot for me to remember, seeing I'm in Little Gizzy in New Zealand. I've been communicating now with Susan for several months, and Susan has written a book called Spirituality and Recovery, which is a really unique, it's actually a very unique book in itself, and the message is really, really good. It's a book that is written in really practical ways for practical solutions, but it is not my book. It is Susan's book. And we are so lucky to have Susan here today. And before I bring her on to speak, I want to say she's also incredibly got a master's of spiritual psychology. So this is a chick that knows what she's talking about. Thank goodness. And so let's hear Susan's wisdom, her experience, where it's come from, and how possibly this wonderful book, please show us your book. This wonderful book can help you. Now, I will say Susan has had, there it is, it's amazing. Susan has also had a bit of a health lung issue, so if she starts coughing or water, please understand. This is a down-to-earth, very urban, very organic type of an interview. So with that being said, Susan, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to, I've read the book, I've gone through it's not a book to read, it's a book to do. It's a doing type book. And I would absolutely love if you could just give us a bit of a history as to what was happening, why you've written the book, and how it can help so many people out there.
Sure. First of all, I'm so happy, Barb, that you invited me on today. I'm just honored to be here, and thank you for that opportunity. So I could give you a long story and a short story.
Do the short story.
The story, yeah, sure. The book came about from my own recovery journey, which started about 13 years ago. A lifetime of ups and downs and kind of inappropriate coping mechanisms, or at least not the healthiest coping mechanism, and lack of self-awareness and so on. I developed an addiction at the age of 45. It was to opiates. It was my mom's opiates. She was sick. She was dying, actually, and gave me some of hers for either a headache or a backache. And that made everything seem better, easier. I've had a lifetime of various addictions, but I would put one foot in, and then when the other foot would start to go out of fear, I was able to step back and stop. But at this time with this drug, I couldn't stop. Not only could I not stop, but it opened the door for a plethora of other drugs that I was familiar with at a younger age to come in and really take hold. The addiction got so bad, I lying, stealing, manipulating, doing really dumb and some illegal things that I could have been arrested for. I was using at times that were totally inappropriate. I could have harmed others. Others were in my care, and it was something that I never, ever thought I was going to do, and I did. And I ended up, after having this addiction for a couple of years, I left my husband, left my home, left my community. I was isolating from family and friends. I quit my job at the very last minute because I was doing things at my workplace that I finally hit my bottom line there. I knew if I didn't stop myself, I was headed towards, some time. But more than that, it was just the devastating effects of what that was doing on me.
Yeah.
And what it was causing me internally. What started out as a coping mechanism just took me down. And I'll never forget the last few months I was using. I literally could not look anyone in the eye. I was so full of shame and guilt. I could not look anyone in the eye. And I was alone. I was isolating. I was using anything I could get my hands on at that point. Even psych meds I was abusing. My life just fell apart at the end. Yeah. Just fell apart with no one there to help me. And finally and eventually, nothing else to look at or blame but myself. Yeah. Which was my saving grace. That's when I realized that I was the one that needed to do the work, that no one was going to do it for me, and no one was going to save me at that point. So, yeah, it was a really, really tough time.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing that. With addiction, we often think it's about younger people. Or if it is an older person, they've had that particular addiction for a very long time. What I really highly respect here is that the information that this addiction started around 45, this is an eye-opener for a lot of people, that you're a normal person. I certainly won't say ordinary because that's got dreadful connotations. But you were living the life, the husband, the work, the house, the car, the children, the whole thing. And how you were able to be taken into that world as well. So from my heart, thank you for sharing the honesty and the openness that you did, because that will make it a lot of difference in a lot of people's world. But I will talk a little bit about that later. So, okay, so how did you move from that realization that you'd hit rock bottom, or what you perceived to be rock bottom? Because we can always go further down. What happened that allowed you to see and make actions, and what actions did you make?
Well, it was the escalation of what was happening in my life, which was less and less, and giving away, and so put it this way, I lost everything that had meaning and purpose in my life. I was just at emptiness. I went into a 30-day rehab, and after I got out, went into a sober living home. So here I am. I was 50. I've had careers. I've had marriages. I've had homes. I've had family and friends. I was completely alone. And like I said, I had nothing else to look at but myself. And Barb, I just got to a point where I just literally threw myself down on the ground. And I'm like, I'm done. I'm done with whatever I think I am or who I need to be or how I dealt with life. I'm just done. And it was at that moment that the healing started.
Right. How did you get into rehab in the first place?
I was out of control. I was out of control. And I had a doctor, a psychiatrist, that wanted to put me on Suboxide for life, which is another drug. It's a synthetic opiate. And knowing me, I would terribly and horribly abuse that. So that put a lot of fear in me. And I checked with my insurance company, and there was a hospital that had a program, an inpatient program that I was available to get into under my insurance. And I don't think if those things had happened, those two elements, I don't know if I would have continued on with my addiction or not. But when I'm working with a physician and his best solution is to put me on drugs for the rest of my life, the fear struck me like, okay, there has to be another way. It was total desperation.
You're on the floor. You're calling out. What happened after that?
Well, that was what I would call my first spiritual awakening. For about 2 to 3 days, I was shaking and crying. Shaking not out of fear, but this eternal, I believe it to be like a release of everything that I'd been holding on to. And the crying was just a release. It was an amazing experience. And I couldn't put my finger on what was happening at the time, but I just knew this was happening, and I just kind of sat with it. And then I slowly started to do the work. I got into a 12-step program. I was going to meetings. I had a sponsor. I was doing the steps. I reached out to a community nonprofit for help with other means of my life, counseling and case management, and a back to work program. So because I knew that no one was going to do it for me, I had the realization that, okay, it's up to me. And what do I want? What do I want? And I wanted to live, and I wanted to be happy.
Right.
Yeah.
So you knew that those two components. When did those two components, wanting to live and wanting to be happy, when did they become bigger than the addiction?
At that moment that I just went to surrender, and I allowed that space, the space for that to start to evolve and not be it from a place of addiction. My happiness wasn't going to come from addiction anymore. My happiness wasn't going to come from what I had or what I had accomplished. I knew at that time that it was internal work, and there was a part of me that was really wanting to have a life, with meaning and purpose and to live. So it was when I surrendered and my own sense of what that meant to me. And it just opened up a whole new place within, to begin again. But what does that mean, to begin again? There's no roadmap to show you how to begin again.
No. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Can I go back in time? Did you have experiences, in your, let's say, 20s or 30s, that you understood what happiness was, that you understood or the inner peace and things like that? Did you have, when you made that decision to surrender and ask for that, did you have something to measure that by from past experiences?
I didn't at that time. But what I know now I was seeking was that childlike, just happiness, curiosity, playfulness, a sense of there was after childhood for me, it was where I was starting to add all that stuff.
Right.
The perfectionism, the validation, the limited beliefs, the codependency, the dependency, that started to form layers and layers over that child. And I didn't realize then but what I was really seeking was that child again, that childlike sense of who I am without all that stuff.
I've thank you so much for that explanation, because I've heard a lot in my life, but I've
Mm,
never heard anybody say that.
mm, mm,
And that is just so eye-opening for me.
mm,
And I really hope that the words that Susan has just spoken
mm,
has resonated with you out there as well. That for me personally,
mm,
my childhood wasn't good. However, I've got great times to remember in there as well.
mhm,
Um, so so you're now in recovery. You're
mhm.
12 steps, and did you do really well at the 12 steps, or was it a struggle? Did you fall back? Tell us what happened there.
Um, I did really well in the 12 steps. Uh, I did I did my step work, which was very uh, allowed me to become much more aware of myself. So let me back up. In that moment of surrender and looking at the ways and means that had gotten me there, I saw myself. I saw
Right,
myself for the first time. I had always felt victimized or manipulated into all these areas that I was holding on to as, whatever I needed to hold on to. And in that moment, I saw my role in all of that. And it was the first moment that I had gained self awareness of me. So the 12-step program really helped, with that work to do the digging, to figure out what I was doing and why. And it was very, very beneficial. And that was all I was doing, for I'd say the first 2 years of my recovery. And then I started to have problems with people in my 12-step program. And I was having extreme reactions to some of the things that I perceived were happening. And they were all personal things that I felt were happening against me. And they may or may not have. That's not the point. The point is how I reacted to it. And it was so when someone starts to get clean and sober and they don't have those things, we can get extremely triggered or reactive, and it's all the stuff that we have within us that all of a sudden now has the ability to come out.
right,
And so at that point, I realized that it would be more beneficial for me to be in a different 12-step program, a codependent 12-step program, because I was very aware that my reaction to what I felt others were saying or doing was a pretty extreme reaction. So I was dependent on them to validate me at that point, or
right,
to feel good about myself. And I had always worked so hard to make sure that that was going to happen. But since I had those reactions and I was in a recovery program, it made me realize I need to do some more work and on this right now. I do have to say that 12-step programs are wonderful. They helped me so much. They were my foundation for my journey. Some of the terms and language that we can hear in a 12-step program is, if you don't call your sponsor, if you don't do the steps, if you don't go to meetings, if you don't do this, if you don't do that, you're going to pick up and die. So even though I knew that I needed to be in another 12-step program, in my heart, my intuition, everything within me, it took me a year to trust that decision.
right.
I was so worried that my addiction wanted me away from NA so I could use again. And it took me a year to trust that was the
Wow.
right decision for me. Yeah, but it
Wow.
was. Yeah, it was.
You've got a master's.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even finish high school. You've got a master's. How did that come about?
Well,
Where in
once.
your story, you've been to recovery,
Mhm.
and where in your story did this happen?
Sure. After, getting into a second 12-step program, I started reading books, doing some workshops. I got my certification as a meditation instructor, and I really learned to be aware of myself much more intently that way. Uh, it was So, and I was looking at other programs, and so there'd be, well, let me back up a little bit. So I really wanted to understand at that point what spirituality is and how it actually helps someone. A lot of these programs will tell you what they have and what you need to do, but they don't really take the time to discuss what spirituality means and how this is actually going to help you when you do the work. So it was really important to me to understand that. I think I discussed with you before that I just left an addiction that I didn't understand. And now I was delving into a whole field of study that was supposed to change my life, and I didn't understand it. So it was really important to me that that I understand what it is that I'm doing and why exactly this is going to, help me and how. So that's where the master came in. I was fortunate enough to have heard about this program. It was close by, and it was amazing. Yeah, I'm still learning from everything that I was taught. Yeah.
I've been actively participating in the spiritual realm now for 42 years, and I still haven't touched the surface of what's available. So I fully understand that. Once you're a student, it's a student of many eons, I'm sure. Your masters that you did, I feel, was that a pivotal point, another pivotal point in your life?
Well,
But the study and the masters is the outcome of a very definite path you took of learning and study. The certificate is the outcome of it all. It's not the be all. Where did that study? Where has it taken you? And I'm really conscious that we've not spoken about your book yet. And I'm not bypassing your story, but I see the journey you've taken, which is extraordinary, may I say, extraordinary. I am so blessed to have you here today. I'm feeling very, very blessed. Where did the book come from? How did the book evolve? Because it's a very different book.
Sure. Just to back up into the spiritual psychology, I'd have to say one of the biggest lessons for me was we had about 250 students in my class. It was 2 years long. We started doing the work right away, with each other, learning how to facilitate, learning how to, what the client has to say, learning how to observe and be an observer. We had trios. And so what I took from a small 12-step program and small meeting room, not realizing that there was much more that could be, opened than that. So the 250 students were from all walks of life, all ages, all sexes, all, cultures. Now, maybe 10% were, discussing addictions or alcoholism in that program, but everyone had trauma. We all carry trauma. We all carry trauma, and addiction is just a part of the trauma. It's not it's not the trauma. It's the trauma that's hiding the underlying trauma. So, and the spirituality that was discussed and applied in those 2 years helped everybody. So that helped me realize that I'm not unique, and even those in recovery from drugs or alcohol are not unique, that we all have things to heal. We all have things to learn. We all have new ways to open up and see things. So that helped me a lot. And that wasn't even what I signed, what I signed up for. Let's learn about group healing. So with the book, after I got out of my spiritual psychology degree program, I looked into recovery coaching. I got a certification in that. I did retreats. I did workshops. I continued on. I didn't just stop there. That was kind of the beginning of a whole world opening up to me. Online courses. And what I eventually found with the going to the book is there's a plethora of programs and information, books, workshops, lectures, degrees. But I found that no one accumulated a compile of information as to, what does this actually mean? What does spirituality mean? What does recovery mean? What does higher power mean? What does unity or whatever? They don't break it down like what it is, and they don't really say how this is actually going to help you. Go to this wellness retreat, or read this book on codependency, or this book on healing the soul, or whatever it might be. They don't discuss, okay, well, this will do that for you. And what I really wanted to do for myself is give myself the grace and the allowance to bring in practices that I was interested in, that called to me, that I didn't need to have it be limited to a certain, amount of, this practice or that practice. And if you don't do that, then you're not following this. And I'm like, oh, I want it to be open. Like anyone can practice spirituality. You can kind of turn almost anything into a spiritual nature, if you have the intention to do so. So it was really important to me to compile, which is this book, this guidebook. It's actually just but it's a practical guide, and it breaks down various spiritual concepts into very easy to understand and follow terms. Just a couple sentences on each one, or a paragraph or two. What are these concepts? And then the principles such as honesty or courage or compassion, what do they mean? How practicing them are going to actually help you with your recovery journey, and various ways that you can start to practice these in a real-time way that has meaning to you. And then the same with the practices, whether it's prayer, meditation, whether it's creative writing, or creative expression. It just breaks it down into a real easy to follow, easy to read way. How do those practices, how will they actually help me if I do that? And what are different ways that are possible out there that I could, possibly start to practice them, that aren't overwhelming and I don't have to commit to. And for me, it's important on my recovery journey that writing this book was really helpful to me. And when I work on it or pick it up, I'm like, oh, there's that. So my practice, and anyone's practice, can evolve. It can be flexible. It can be when it gets to be a little stale and you're kind of zoning out, it's like, okay, well, what else could I start that has, not that you're giving up one, but, sometimes we need, new ideas and new discoveries in our spiritual journey. So
what I really love about your book, and I do have the book, by the way, what I love about your book is that one of the things that I find with the New Age era, and I'm not from the New Age era, I'm from the old school. I was trained 40 years ago in a very old-fashioned way. And so I hold on to that because that's who I am. But the New Age philosophies and the downloads and all that tend to become a little complicated. It's like the more colourful words that you can use, the big words, the better it sounds. And this is maybe a bit of judgment on my behalf here. So, don't kill the messenger. It's my opinion. But it just seems to be very confusing at times.
Spirituality was, it can be, I'm sorry. For me, it was vague, and it was it was vague, and it was just really hard to grasp.
And this is what I love about your book. is it's in simple terms. And the kiss, keep it simple, sweetness. And it's really when I'm in a dilemma in my mind, and I go through depression very badly at times. I've suffered all my life through trauma, but the thing I don't cope with very well is complication. When I'm in that, I need simplicity. And when I opened your book, when I went through your book, that was the one thing I was incredibly impressed with, was the simplicity. It's not easy. No, don't think this book is an easy book to go through. It is not easy. It is simple. And there is a big difference between the two. And the other thing is, because it's so simple, it is easy for anyone to apply it to. That it doesn't matter what your expertise or your qualifications or your life experiences or your intelligence level, let's say that and put it out there, that it is for everyone that is going through recovery. But and most, I think I'm right if I say that most recovery programs have a real spiritual base.
They do. And you know why? Because it works. It works.
Well, that's the base of who we are anyway.
Yeah,
And of
right.
course, and if you are in recovery, if you're looking at this video today, and be it 5 years down the track or wherever you are, this is a good companion book for you. And the other thing that I found with this, if I may, is that I can pick it up, turn to a page, and I'll bet you my bottom dollar the solution will be in that page. And it doesn't have philosophy, it doesn't have great examples, it doesn't have the big story. It is a simple, step-by-step practical guide to help you bring the best into your world at any given time, on any given feeling or emotion that you're going through. It is that good. It is that good a book.
Thank you.
Susan,
thank you.
Thank you for writing it.
Thank you. And for the, just for the sake of your audience, that the recovery that I'm talking about not only is recovery from drugs and alcohol, but it's the healing that brings us back to the recovery of our sense of self.
Yeah.
And if there's terminology in it that talks about addiction or, well, pretty much just if it brings the term of addiction, just simply, supplement that with, recovery from, for your sense of self. Because we typically all have things that, we can address and heal. That's the main goal.
Well, one of the addictions that I found I had, and it took me a long time to understand this addiction, which is slightly different, and this is the reason I'm bringing it up, is because it doesn't look like an addiction. Okay. And my addiction was trying to save the world from pain. And that's when I was doing my heyday of doing readings. I did like 14,000 readings in my day, but in that 10-year gap, I couldn't understand why I was so obsessed, and it took over me to the detriment of my family and all sorts of things. But it was because, and when I went back and did some analogies on it to work through it, it was because nobody saved me as a little girl. And I got to a stage, and I didn't know that was an addiction, but it was an addiction. I wanted to save everybody in my own little way from pain that could be befallen them in the future. As silly as that sounds, that's an addiction as well. So addiction isn't just alcohol or drugs or sex or porn or whatever. It's can be a lot more subtle than that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Could be like perfectionism. I was addicted to that.
Yeah.
Attention seeking. I was addicted to that. The ways and means that I would, gambling. I had problems with gambling and food. I didn't go into full-blown addiction, but they were definitely problematic and they caused, some suffering in my life.
Yeah.
So just those ways and means that we tend to act out to try to feel good, feel better. So what I like to say is we look outside for the goods, and the goods are inside. So it's starting to find that within that will fulfill that search.
And this is why I think, for me personally, the reason I wanted to interview you today was not only to tell your story, which I think is incredible, that you were of middle age. Addiction took over in a way that you had not expected. And to me, that's a really valuable story, because most people think, as I said before, it's for younger people, but it's not. And this is a taboo subject. We're not allowed to talk about addiction in older age. That they are finding surveys, certainly in Australia, where I'm from, but the amount of addiction to alcohol with women over 65, because their partner's left or they're passed over and there's a nothingness in their world. There's many ages of it. And that was one thing I wanted to share with everyone. But the other is that addiction isn't the obvious things. It's not just about narcotics and alcohol.
Right.
It is many other things. And I think you have been able to bring that to light and share to our greater audience that through trauma, addictions reside, and they can come out decades later.
Yeah. If you would have told me at the age of 40 in 5 years I was going to lose everything to addiction, I would have said you're absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
It was not what I was expecting.
No.
By the time you follow that thread of addiction, for me anyway, and a lot of people, by the time you get to the end of the thread, you look around you, there's nothing left, and you're like, how the hell did I end up here?
Yeah.
This is baffling to me as it is to anyone outside of, my world. Like, how did I end up here? I never would have guessed that would have happened. So it was a surprise. And at this point, it was, my biggest blessing, because it brought me a new life, a new way of seeing myself, a new way of living. I'm closer to who I am. I was going to say I'm a different person, but that's not true. I'm closer to who I am authentically. I don't like to use that term authentic, but that's what best suits me here.
Yeah.
And so I'm closer to my sense of self, and at much better terms with everything around me. And that's wonderful. That's a blessing.
Thank you so much, Susan. I'm going to I'll be putting this on my my Facebook pages, and of course into the YouTube. But I will also put a link as to how you can purchase Susan's book. And please think about what addiction really means. It is not the obvious. No, I'll take that back. It's not always the obvious addictions that are the addictions that can cause a lot of issues and a lot of trouble. And so if you want to do yourself a favor, if you want to have a book that can guide you into allowing you to see your own self and your own self through the suggestions and the written part of the book, because every journey is a personal one. Every journey is a different one. Our journey into spirituality is all different. Our concepts and our understandings are all different. And this is a really good baseline informational, practical guide. So anybody out there, and there should be several million of you that require this book, please contact Susan. And if you want to know anything more about her classes, her courses, her information, or just more about her, what an amazingly articulate, soulful person she is too. Susan, thank you so much for sharing your journey and for being so open and honest with us today. So much respect coming your way. And please keep up the good work. Yep. The Global Goodness Matters world needs you. Until next time, and there will be a next time with Susan, I can guarantee that. Until then, we could say ka kite anō, which means goodbye until we meet again. But stay rooted in your light, stay calm, be safe, and don't forget to breathe.